Hello everyone. In today's video we are continuing our cross series on the advanced cross, and this video will cover all of the patterns when you have two opposite colors, and we're just going to be focusing on two pieces for now. And I had mentioned this in the previous video where we're going to be covering these patterns, and you can either have two opposite colors or two adjacent colors, and the two adjacent colors will be in the next video. If you are looking on tips and tricks on how to solve the cross or so understanding some basic cross concepts, you need to look at one of my previous videos, which I will leave a link in the description below. This video will not be teaching you how to solve the cross. It will be teaching you how to solve certain patterns that you find when solving the cross. So you might find this pattern where we have two opposite colors. We have one white facing you, two pieces in a single face, and we have one white facing you, and they're not touching each other. Well, they could also be touching each other. They could also be two white faces, and those two white faces could also be touching each other. So you either have two pieces next to each other, two pieces opposite of each other, and you have two white faces, one white face, or no white faces. So this video will cover all of the scenarios that you can have when you have two opposite colors, when solving your cross edge pieces, when they're touching each other, when they're not touching each other, and when you have 0, 1, and 2 white pieces facing you. The goal of this video is to introduce you to the concept of solving pairs of pieces for the cross instead of looking at the entire cross as a whole. And the reason we're doing this is you're going to see these patterns when solving, and if you can notice that, oh, I see this pattern, so I know a D2 R prime will solve it, then maybe that'll help you construct your cross in a little easier manner, so you can look at pairs of pieces and determine what's the best way to solve the cross based on where they're sitting in the pairs that you know. So that's the goal of this video, is just to look at some of the patterns that you're going to find when solving the cross and teach you how to insert those various patterns. And then, once you know them all, then you can combine them to more easily solve your cross. That's the goal of this video. If you're looking on a tutorial on how to solve the cross, I will put a link in the description. This is not that video. This video is just talking about some of the patterns that we're going to get and how to solve those patterns. Start setting up some of these patterns and then really try to understand how to solve this case the best way possible, because there's a couple different ways to solve every case, and it's all case dependent based on where your other two cross pieces are or your cross edges are. So I do encourage you to sit down and start thinking about it in these lines. This is just what's worked for me. And again, we're building our knowledge, so this video will directly build upon the last video. So if you have not watched the last video, I encourage you to do so. A lot of the same concepts of this pattern building is referenced in that video as well. When we're talking about these cases, I'm going to show you when the two pieces that we're looking at are in either the front face or the side face. But if you can mentally do the conversion, then this also works for if they're in the back face or the left face as well. So for demonstration purposes, I'll show you when it's either in the front face or sometimes on the right face is a little easier to do on various cases. So I'll show you those two, but if you can do the mental gymnastics, then you can put it in the back and do the conversion as well. And just a couple things to know before we get started with specific cases. When we're wanting to move, let's say we wanted to move this piece over here, you can either do a fat U move or a E-slice move. When I'm doing the cases, I will show you a specific one, but know that if you don't want to move this top layer, then just do a E-slice, and if you want to move this top layer, do a fat U move. And then for each one of these videos, I will be showing the pattern, how to recognize it, how to solve it, probably in a couple different ways. I have one or two ways to solve most of them, and then any finger tricks that I've found to be helpful. And I also see this as a little mini game. The whole cross entirely I see as a mini game. So I try to look into the cube as far as I can and do the cross, do the AUF, and then at least know where my first pair is. So start practicing, kind of mentally doing the cross in your mind, and then closing your eyes and doing it, because it's very, very helpful to close your eyes and be able to solve the cross. And then you can start looking at your first pair. Then once you get decent enough at it, you can start looking at your second pair, at least tracking your second pair while you're solving your cross and your first pair. So I see the cross as a little mini game. I don't see it as an obstacle getting in the way of me solving it. I see it as a little mini game that's part of solving the cube. Another thing I wanted to mention is it's important to, as you get better at the cross, it's important to be aware of the faces that you're moving. So let's say we do this case. So this case is going to move this face and this face. So if we know that these two faces are going to be the only ones moving, then we can look here and assume that all of these pieces won't move at all. And if you have some other cross pieces here, that's good information to know. So it's important to start being more aware of the faces that you're moving when you're solving your cross. So in this case, it's just this one, and that solved, it solved that pattern, but it also only moved this face and this face. So, but it's important for you to start paying attention to that so we can be more aware of what faces are moving. Also, another goal of mine is to solve all of these in 3 moves or less, because if you have 2 pieces and you can solve them in 3 moves, then your other 2 pieces you can solve in 3 moves, and there's 6 moves for our cross. So the goal is to always solve in 3 moves. Now, there's a very few cases where it takes 4 to solve it, and I'll point those out. But for the most part, you can solve it in 3. I will show you some longer cases occasionally, because they might just be variants that you might need sometime, but the goal is to solve every case in 3 moves, worst case 4. And when we're doing our cases, we're going to be looking at 2 pieces and assume they're in the same face, and we're going to look at they're either touching each other or they're not, so they're on the opposite sides of the cube, or they're right next to each other. So this is what I'm going to refer to as touching each other. And then you either have 0 white faces, you have 1 white face, or you have 2 white faces towards you. And each one of those they're touching each other, or they're opposite from each other, or they're not touching each other. So we're going to go through all of these, and in these cases we have, it's in the upper right hand corner, it's in the lower right hand corner, it's in the lower left hand corner, or it's in the upper left hand corner. So we either have a top left, a top right, a top bottom. So if we do something like this, so now we have opposites not touching each other, 1 white, and they're either in the top or bottom, or the left or right, or the left or right with a white face on the left instead of the right. So a lot of these are kind of inverses of each other. I'm only going to go over one case, and you'll have to convert it to the left if you need to. Let's get started. The first case we're going to look at is when they are touching each other and there's no whites facing you. And there's 2 unique cases for this. You can have the one in the top and the right, or you can have it in the right and the bottom, because this one is the same as this one, and this one is the same as this one. So there's 2 unique cases that we need to remember on this one. So for this case, what we're going to do is we're going to put it in the right face. We're just going to drop this down into the bottom layer. We're going to D2, and then drop this into the bottom layer. And then that solves them relative to each other. So again, we're going to put it in the right face. You can do this in the front face too. If it's here, just F, D2, F, and that solves your case. So that's if it's in the top right. The other way you can do it is if you put this over here and then drop it down, and then you can fat U prime, and now it's back here, and then you drop it down, and that solves it as well. Now that's if it's in the top layer and the middle layer. If it's in the middle layer and the bottom layer, then this one's easy. One's already solved, so you just D2 and then F to solve it. Or if it's in the right layer, you would just D2 and R. Solves it relative to each other. So that's a pretty easy case. The next one we're going to cover is where you have a single white face facing you and they're touching each other. And you have a clockwise and a counterclockwise version of this. So this one is this white face. This other piece is counterclockwise to the white face. So the white face is on the right, and this is counterclockwise. Well, the white face is on the bottom. This is still counterclockwise. It's on the left, and then it's on the top. So the other version of this same case is where the non-white face is clockwise to the white face. So here's a white face, and it's to the right. Here's a white face, and it's this way. So we're going to look at a single one of this. We're going to look at the counterclockwise version, but the clockwise is the same. You just have to adjust the moves accordingly. When we have this scenario, we're going to put this piece down, move this over, and then place it as well. So there's our 3 moves. Here's 1, 2, 3, and that will solve it relative to each other. The other way you can do it is to put this down, and then D to move this in the back, and then F2 to solve it. I think the easiest way to do this one is just to R prime U L2, and that solves that one. So when we're here, when we have the white on the bottom and the other one on the right, we can do an F move, D prime, and then L move. So basically we're setting up this case and then solving this case, which is just a D, L. So there's one way to do it. The other way to do it is you can use either a fat move or a slice move, depends on what you need. So that's 4 moves, but it still works. So you would do a tiny U, L, F prime, R prime. And if you put it on the right side, if you put this in the right face, you can just solve this one, orient this one, because this is a bad edge, so we convert this to a good edge by solving this one, doing a fat or a slice, and then solves that too. So I think the preferred on this one for me is, because it's 3 moves, it's easy. When you have this one, this is extremely easy. It's just you move this over and solve it. So you just D, L, that solves it. And if you're here, you just D, F, solves it. So this one's pretty easy. And if we have it here, where the white's on top, then we're going to just put this down, converting this bad edge into a good edge. We're going to either D and then L, or fat U and a B move. It's fine too. And if you put it on the right face, you can R prime, and then now you've converted this bad edge into a good edge, so you're converting this edge into a good edge, and now we can just fat U and then L solves. So again, this is the way I normally do it. There's our 3 moves. Okay, now we have them touching, and there are 2 whites facing us. For this case, there's 2 unique cases for this. You either have it on the top layer and the middle layer, so this one or this one, it's basically the same, or you have it in the middle layer and the bottom layer, so either on the right and the bottom or the left and the bottom. And this one's kind of basic to solve because you just drop this down, you can push and then drop this one down, and it solves. And there's your 3 moves. 1, 2, 3. So another way that you can solve this one is if you put this over on top of it, then you're just converting it into this case and solving this case. So that's 4 moves instead of 3, but it might be beneficial, depends on what your other pieces are doing. And when they're in the middle and bottom layer, so either on the right bottom or the left bottom, we can just put this one down in its place, F prime, or F, to convert that bad edge into a good edge, and then you can drop this too. Oops. So, again, and I'm holding on back here with my fingers, so I've dropped that down, and then I'm holding on here to prevent this. So, down, hold, F, down. The other way you can do this is instead of doing, you can just do an M move, then move the U over, and then L prime. That also works, it just depends on how you want your white cross oriented when you're done. So you can either R prime, F, L, or M, U, L for this one. And the left hand is the same thing, you're just doing different. You're doing it with your other hand. In this case, we have no whites facing us, and they are not adjacent to each other, so they're not touching each other. And basically this has 2 cases. You either have it on the top of the bottom, or you have it on the left and the right. And if you have it on the top and the bottom, it's really easy. This one's already solved, so if you put it on your right face, you can either U2, L2, and that solves it, or D2, R2, and that solves it. And those are the easy ways to solve that case. When it's on the left or the right, all you're really going to do is you're going to set up the previous case and then solve. So we're just going to, I'd like to put it on the right because the front moves, you would have to front D2 and then F2, and that's a little awkward. So if you put it on the right side, and then we know we're going to do a D2, so we will pull this down, so an R, D2, and then an R2 solves as well. So again, solve that one. And that's when you have no whites and they're not touching. This case is where you have one white facing you and they're not touching each other, and you have three unique cases. You have it where the white's on top and the other piece is on the bottom. You have it where the white's on bottom, the other piece is on top, and then you have them where they're both in the middle layer, because this one is the same as this one. It's just a left and right hand version. So we have three unique cases. We're going to start with this one where the white's on top, and for this one there's a couple different ways you can do it. The first way is you're going to put this piece here and then this piece down here. So you're just going to D prime this piece over, and then F R prime will solve them. If you put it on the right hand side, you can basically do the same thing, and you put this in the back, and then R prime F solves that too. So, and that's our three moves. So 1, 2, 3 solves those two pieces. So if they're in the middle layer, what we're going to do is we're going to put this down into the right spot, put it in the back, and then move this one down. So we'll R prime, D, F prime. So if it's in the middle layer, you just place the one down, put that opposite relative to where this one's going to be, and then place this one. And when you have a white on bottom and your other one on top, this is actually one of the worst cases you can get. So I would suggest, if you see this case, then try to find other patterns, and you don't address this case, because this is a minimum of 4 moves to solve this case. But how you would go about solving this case is you would move this to the side, and we're going to move it to the right, but you can move it to the left and then solve inversely. But we're going to move this here. We're going to R2 to place it in the right spot, and then we can just convert this one to a good edge with an F move, and then solve. And now these two are solved relative to each other. All the solutions that I found for this are just 4 moves. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Another way you can solve this is if you convert this bad edge when you move this once, convert, insert, put it in the back, and then place this one. So again, we're converting this one, placing it, moving it out of the way, and then placing this one. And the last case we're going to cover is when you have 2 whites facing you and they are opposite from each other, or they're not touching each other, and we have 2 unique cases. We either have it in the top and the bottom, or we have it in the left and the right. And this is one of the goals. So if you see this pattern, so if you see opposites and they're not touching each other, then this is one of the easiest cases, because the top and the bottom is easy, but the left and the right, it's a 1-move solution. So it's 1M will solve these two. So you want to keep that in mind. Or an R prime L solves. So it's one of the easiest cases to solve, one of the fewest moves to solve. So this is one of your good cases. So find these. Now if it is in the top and the bottom, all we're going to do is convert this to the side one, and then do an M move or an L R move. Depends on how you prefer to do it. So if it's in the top and the bottom, all we're doing is converting it into the middle case and then inserting. Another way you can solve this case is if you see it in the top and the bottom, if you point the yellow face towards you, so here's your case, but if you point the cube like this towards you, then you can D, M, and it solves that case. So this case is solved by moving the center over and into its right spot. So you're not moving these pieces, you're really moving the center. You're modifying where the center goes instead of where these pieces go. So you can do that in a couple different ways. You can move this center up and then over, and now it's solved. Or what I'd like to do is if you point the yellow towards you, so if you put your 2 pieces, if they're in the top and the bottom, and if you point the 2 pieces at the bottom like this, now you can do a D move and an M move, and that will solve that case. So it's a 2-move insert for both of these, where it's in top and bottom. So you can either convert it to the easier case and then move, or if you point it towards you, you can D and M. You're doing the same thing, it's in a different axis rotation, but you're doing the same moves. And this has a lot to do with moving the center around instead of the pieces. So when you're solving your cross, you don't necessarily have to move these pieces around, you can move this center. So this center needs to go here, so we just move it up and then over into the right spot. And that's 2 moves for that piece. And then if it's here, all you're really doing is moving the center in the right spot. So we'll just do an M move, and that moves it. So this is one of the easiest cases to get. If you can set this case up, it's preferred. So if you have this, well then you know that you're 1 move away from setting this case up, and this case is 1 move away from being solved. So even if it's, like this, that's 1, 2, 3, still solves that case. So it's one of the better cases to get. When you see this, make sure you start planning your cross around this, because this is a good starting point. And that's it for the opposite colors video. The next video we're going to cover are the ones where you have adjacent colors, and we'll cover all the various cases. And these are actually a little more complicated because you can have them adjacent and oriented correctly, and adjacent and oriented incorrectly. So in this case, this is oriented correctly because you can solve it in 2 moves, but this is not. It takes 3 moves to solve because they're not oriented correctly. So you have to do some additional stuff to. You have to make one more move to solve the orientation while you're solving those 2 pieces. So it's a little more complicated, but it's still pretty basic, easy stuff, and we'll get to that in the next video. And until then, happy cubing!